Harry's wife, the mercenary monsters. One of the important things to understand about Harry's wife is that while she attracts repeated criticism from people, and the criticism itself is an issue for her, what is a greater problem for it is its amplification. Ordinarily, a narcissist, the majority of narcissists, when they experience a criticism, it comes from one person. Their spouse might say, "You're horrible to me. You say awful things to me." That, of course, is challenge fuel. The narcissist is threatened by that because that person has to be under control. That person is there to admire and laud the narcissist, not to criticize them. How can it be that they can view them so badly, so unpleasantly? That doesn't make sense. And therefore, their criticism is a threat to control, and it's nullified by the narcissist arguing, or in some instances smearing, or sometimes by the narcissist flouncing off, asserting control by withdrawal. And thus, the threat to control is dealt with. The challenge occurred just from that one person. Or it might be that that person wounds. They fail to answer the telephone as a consequence of them being busy. It causes wounding to the narcissist, but it is just the wounding from that one person. This is what happens for the majority of narcissists because they're not famous or infamous. But for Harry's wife, when she is criticised, the media and the press and the broadcasters, which she has courted so much, are now content to amplify that criticism of her because they don't like her either. And it's not because they're racist, it's not because they're haters. They simply dislike the way that she has behaved, and they want to expose her for her contradictions and for her hypocrisies. And the problem that Harry's wife has is that now, whenever she does anything, and where she is specifically criticised, as Bill Simmons has criticised her, others will pick up that ball and run with it. They're not minded to shield her, downplay it, not give it any airtime or press coverage, as some people are fortunate enough to experience, that where that famous person engages in some poor behaviour, the press turn a blind eye to it, and the majority of people don't know about it. But with Harry's wife, not only does she face repeated criticisms from individuals, but once she does, it becomes an even bigger problem because it's aired by so many outlets. It's a little bit like getting punched, and then that punch is brought back again and again and again and again and again. Naturally, her narcissism deals with it. Some of these threats to control she won't know about because she doesn't look at the relevant press piece. But we know that as a consequence of her style of narcissism, she often does look at social media and videos and the press and broadcast news because she can't help herself through that need to assert control. But she won't see everything. So some of the criticisms, the punches in effect, don't land. But many of them do. This results in her either ramping up the PR campaign to try and deflect from it by talking about positive aspects of her, or smearing by complaining about the way that she's portrayed to Harry or whoever will listen, possibly doling out pity plays to engender sympathy, or she simply has to try and ignore it. But that becomes increasingly difficult for her because each and everywhere she goes, there's a comment, there's something on social media, there's a video about her criticising her behaviours, there's a broadcast piece. There's the likes of Piers Morgan and Meghan Kelly lending their voices, airing the grievances of other individuals. And once again, the collateral consequences of Harry's wife loom large. She causes these things to happen because of her own behaviour and the way that her narcissism functions. And rather than stay out of the way, she keeps on and keeps on, demonstrating her style of narcissism with the repeated consequential conduct that occurs. And here we examine an instance where Breitbart has picked up the ball with regard to the latest criticism of Harry's wife. Let's see how that shapes up. The article by John Nolte tells us, those sycophantic media on Friday were all the Harry and Harry's wife and Spotify mutually agree to part ways, which I LOL'd at. Today, Spotify is kicking these lazy fucking grifters out the door by calling them lazy fucking grifters. Podcaster and Spotify executive Bill Simmons started things off on his own podcast saying, the fucking grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them. So I got to get drunk one night and tell the story of the Zoom I had with Harry to try and help him with a podcast idea. It's one of my best stories. Maybe Spotify should overpay me to be an executive because I could have told them all that before the company signed a $25 million contract with this despicable duo of crybaby family backstabbers. Honestly, only an overpaid Spotify executive or overpaid Netflix executive or Oprah Winfrey could be fooled by these two mercenary monsters. All they have to sell is what will harm their own family, their own flesh and blood. We all have family issues. I'm sure members of my family have issues with me being the black sheep and all. But it is truly beyond my comprehension to go public with family business, much less turn it into an industry. Pausing there, of course, it's turned into an industry by Harry's wife because a narcissism directs her to do so. Allow me to put it this way, Nolte continues. If someone is willing to publicly smear their own family and eager to do so while grandma and grandpa are obviously frail and not long for this world, what do you think such people are willing to do to you? Duh. According to the New York Post, one Spotify executive described Harry's wife as lazy. Harry's wife and Harry are the outlier on all of this. I think they have come off as being lazy and difficult, he said. I think the other word he was looking for was entitled. Spotify signs a $25 million contract with these two losers to deliver podcast content. And all they get in return is one 12-episode show where Harry's wife sits around with insanely rich and privileged women to whine about stereotypes, and some sort of holiday special which I'm sure was loaded with joy and gratitude. At least Spotify was smart enough to add deliverables to the content. According to numerous reports, the Harry and Harry's wife will not be paid anything close to the full amount they could have earned under the deal. In better news, Harry and Harry's wife might be going broke, not due to lack of money, but due to their insane spending. Apparently, security alone cost them $2 million a year. Really? $2 million a year? Does anyone care enough about these two that $2 million in security is required? Or is this just another vanity spend of self-importance? I would love to see these two go broke and Harry's wife reduced to the only status she's ever earned. That of a D-list celebrity on a cable show, while Harry stays home emasculating himself, wearing an apron in their Encino studio apartment, where the only security is a chain on the door and an alcoholic named Melba who sits outside smoking Pall Malls all day, complaining about the fluoride in the water. An acerbic summary of this story about them being called fucking grifters, but it demonstrates another view of how they are regarded, that they are seen as this pair of incompetent dullards. Below the line is always entertaining when it comes to Breitbart. Amy, it took Spotify years to figure out what most people already knew. Somebody responds to that saying, the ginger cuck and the gold-digging dominatrix. Dan C. At least Judas had the decency to off himself. Glenn Garrison, oh so true, now they are pissed off because they themselves thought money grows on tree. Miska Solmier, all they figured out was that the royalties, as in ad revenue, are no longer worth the hassle. HJ, this is turning out to be a reverse fairy tale. The prince kissed a toad and turned into one himself. Gloria Hager. Everybody could see they had no talent for anything. All they do is constantly whine about their families. They are so much alike. I hope they stay together because no one else could put up with their whining. They are grifters. Nui Ardente. It's great that the Spotify guy spoke the truth about these low-life scam artists bootlicking crap heels. Liberal Lemming. I'll bet an expired Burger King coupon that Harry's wife sues for discrimination and racism after this. Harry will carry her purse into the courtroom. Scathing comments below the line, and there are many hundreds of them. But this Breitbart article is demonstrative of how the criticisms are amplified for Harry's wife and how her downward spiral is speeding up. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.